I am so thrilled the opportunity to follow up David and Dana Carosa with the message of what we're doing, and just thrilled that we can kind of work together and accomplish a similar mission. And so what I want to do tonight is threefold. I do just want to share a little bit about who I am and specifically what we're doing with Appian Media. For those of you who were able to join us this afternoon for the screening of Out of Egypt, thank you for that. I'm the one mainly responsible for editing that together, and I do it in a small room by myself. And so it's thrilling to sit in a room with people, like actual human people, and see you all enjoy that film. So thank you for joining us for that. I want to talk about how Appian Media and Sacred Selections really are working together to accomplish a similar mission. We're tackling it from a couple of different avenues, but we're accomplishing the same thing. And then finally, I want to just close out with sharing a few stories about the journey home, about the story of the Exodus, and things that I hope are helpful to all of us in our Christian walk, specifically those who are walking the adoption journey. Whether you're some of these families that are supporting the adoptive families, maybe you are a family waiting for a child, and you're waiting through that sometimes lengthy process. But for all of us, what can the Exodus teach us, and how can we look forward as we walk the journey home? And the fonts are all a little bit different, but imagine them being really awesome in your mind. I would love to connect with you all. And so I'm throwing this up simply to let you know that you can reach out to me on social media and there at my email address. I love to talk to fellow Christians, especially people who are doing creative things and doing kingdom work in a unique and creative way. And so by all means, you can Google my name. It's kind of a weird thing, but I'm the only one on the internet with that name. So until I commit crimes of an international nature, it's actually a really good thing. So please do that. I want to just share with you a little bit about what Appian Media does. Perhaps you saw this trailer before we watched Out of Egypt, but I want to show it again, just a glimpse of the heart behind Appian Media.
The Bible has the power to really, truly change people.
When you think about what Appian Media has set out to do, the whole point is to bring these places to life.
To realize that I was near the places where those events took place is really, really special.
Film is a powerful art form. It's about time that Christians harness that for good.
There's not just 5 or 10 stories to tell, there's 500 stories to tell.
We're not talking about fairy tales here, we're talking about real people, real places, and real events.
To be able to use something that we know can be a powerful tool for good, that's why this is so needed.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And when you start with that truth, then you're well on your way to learning wisdom.
It increases their faith in God. It increases their faith in God's Son and His Word, and it's worth it.
And to God be the glory.
So Appian Media, we are a non-for-profit Christian team, and we are leveraging today's technology to create new and interactive ways to encourage a deeper, more meaningful, and accurate study of God's Word. Appian Media is committed to creating tools that are biblically accurate, free to the world, and accessible to all, in an effort to bring people into a closer relationship with God through a better understanding and application of the Bible. And I hope you're already starting to recognize some similar themes in our mission and Sacred Selections. Appian Media was born from a need that our co-founder, Stuart, and I both saw back in 2015. At the time, Stuart was teaching a high school Bible class. And he said, I can't understand it. Stuart is another media professional living in Indianapolis. And he said, I'm teaching this Bible class and I can't understand it. The kids are coming in and they've been learning like this all day. And they come into Bible class and we say, put all of that away and let's learn like this. Now, I do not intend in any way to disparage the book. The book is where the power is. God chose the written word to preserve it over thousands of years. It's worked really well. And yet, the way that we learn today, especially young people, is like this. We're scrolling, we're clicking, sometimes we're putting entire computers on our faces. But we come into Bible class and we say, we don't learn that way here. We're going to pull these maps out from 30 years ago and Stu said, surely there's got to be a better way. And I go on YouTube and I'm looking for videos and I'm finding a few different things. I'm finding videos that are biblically accurate and they're super boring and the kids don't want to watch them. They were made 30 years ago and there's someone, we affectionately call these lectures from the land. Someone standing there in Jerusalem happens to be way off in the background. And the camera is in the same position for 20 minutes. And he said that the kids can't, they just can't. But they're biblically accurate. He said, or we find videos that are really engaging, they're really entertaining, but I have to give caveats. I have to kind of explain to the kids now when he says this about this part of the biblical text, that's not exactly accurate. And when he makes this statement about Christianity, that's not what Acts tells us. And he said, I'm tired of giving caveats. And he said, and a lot of them, if they're going to be biblically accurate and entertaining, I have to pay for them before I even know what the content is. He said, and this is, he said, how hard could it possibly be for us to make that ourselves? And I'm so glad we didn't actually know the answer to that question. We said, surely it can't be that difficult. And so in 2016, we took our first trip to Israel and produced the first 5 episodes of what we now call Following the Messiah. And over the last, let's see if we can do it. Just thinking about it, Bill. There it is. Over the last, I guess, 8 years now, we've been able to produce 4 major docu-series. Following Messiah is a 10-episode series about the life of Jesus. That took us 2 trips to Israel over a couple of years. We did a series called Searching for a King, which is about the first kings of Israel. And it's heavy on the archaeology and answering the question, can we trust the biblical text? Something incredibly useful for all Christians, but especially young Christians before they head off to college and get that ripped out of them. Can we trust the biblical text? Trial and Triumph was our series about the 7 churches of Revelation. We traveled to Turkey in the midst of COVID, and that's an interesting experience. Ask me about that sometime. And not only did we visit those 7 churches, but we visited Christians from all over the world who were going through similar challenges. And we really were trying to get Christians to understand that the Bible is relevant. It's not only reliable, but it's relevant. And then this year we produced Out of Egypt, and that was a 2-year production. We pray that it's been a benefit and a blessing. In between those series, we've created multiple children's series. And these is one of the ways that we first really started to connect with sacred selections. We're making tools for young children to try and get them invested and engaged with the Bible. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And in the midst of COVID, when we couldn't travel like we were expecting to, we started to produce content here in this country. Bible Study Without Borders, we did a series on the Sermon on the Mount and on Ephesians. And then I lost track of how many episodes of these various podcasts. The point is, we're trying to get people excited and re-engaged with the biblical text because that's how God changes people. That's how hearts are changed. That's how people are motivated to become more like God and more like Christ. And in the midst of these videos, very early on, people said, how do we teach this? It's one thing to watch videos. We never intended for them to be binge watched. It would be quite a task. Let me tell you, it's about 48 hours worth of content. We want people to watch these videos and get back into the biblical text. And so we've created a series of printed workbooks These are really rather unique. They've got detailed maps and stunning photos of the Bible lands. Dan Kingsley is the one responsible for most of those photos. Illustrations and a lot of thought-provoking discussion questions. You're not going to find a lot of fill in the blank or multiple choice in our workbooks. But most uniquely, each book has a series of QR codes throughout each lesson. In fact, you'll see a sample of them on the back table back there, where you can scan the QR code, watch the video, open your Bible, and see it as you're reading the text. And since 2016, we've been able to show this content in about 160 different countries around the world. Through the various languages that we've been able to translate it into. Appian Media, we picked that name because of, maybe some of you recognize it, but the Appian Way was a Roman roadway during the 1st century. And it's what Rome built to connect all the countries that they were taking over, to connect this incredible network of countries to further commerce and their military objectives. It's one of the reasons why historians say that Christianity spread as quickly as it did during the 1st century, because for the first time in human history, they had an almost universal language, Greek, and they had a roadway connecting countries that had never previously been connected, and Christianity hit that roadway and spread. And so what we're trying to do at Appian Media is use the roadway of the internet. It's a roadway built for all kinds of reasons, some of them not great, but it's there. And that roadway now is carrying the gospel to countries that many of us will never be able to visit. Some of these countries are not safe for Christianity to be brought in, but they have YouTube and they have video. And so the gospel is getting into these places. And we have been blessed throughout the years on a couple of different occasions to have partnered with Sacred Selections to help get this content into the hands of people, not just young people, but whole families. Back in 2022, we partnered with David and Dana during one of our Giving Tuesday campaigns. We wanted to gift a family study pack of our Lessons from the Land, the Gospels. It's a series of shorter videos meant for grade school kids. And we said, how many families do you have? How many Sacred Selections families are there back in 2022? I was thinking like 100 or 150. Because we would like to give each of them, a DVD and a couple of workbooks. And it was about 350 families. And we said, our goal is to raise this certain amount of money, and a portion of that will be used to give these workbooks and these DVDs. And we did it in about 48 hours. So that 350 families were given this material, so that as they are adopted into Christian homes who are looking for ways to instill the love of God into their children, to equip them for a life of service and of faith, we are able to, in our own small way, provide them with some of the tools that they can use to do that. And so tonight, for the rest of the time that I have, I want us to consider what I hope will be important lessons for each of us, whatever stage of life we might find ourselves in. As we consider the journey home, I've already been asked the question after the movie was played this afternoon, like, what was the trip like? We traveled to Egypt and we traveled to Jordan a couple of years ago. And the team members all said, if this had been the first trip that Appian Media had ever taken, it would have been the only trip that Appian Media would have ever taken. I mean no disrespect to the people of Egypt and Jordan. They are wonderful. I mean, they've been over backwards for us. Those countries are difficult on a variety of levels to produce video in. Incredibly expensive, a lot of red tape, and it's not, if you can believe it, it's not the most safe place to shoot video. And yet our team was up for the challenge, and we got back, and after, it was typical for me for production trips, I was basically sick for about a week afterwards, getting over the jet lag and the exhaustion. People say they want to, I'd love to join you on one of your trips. It's like, no, actually, no, you would not. We were able to kind of think through, like, what did we just go through? We spent 12 to 13 days tracing a potential route that these Israelites took coming out of Egypt into the Promised Land, they spent 40 years. And we were belly aching after the third or fourth day. We spent one day in Jordan. You saw us on those trucks, and we're in the middle of nowhere. There is no water for miles and miles. It's what we have in the trucks. And the afternoon rolls around, and we've guzzled all our water and eaten all of our food. And we said, well, if we were Israelites, we'd be dead. We couldn't have made it past the first afternoon. Neither could they without the help of God. And so what I want to talk about are just 3 different lessons that I hope that we can take. And one is, maybe you don't realize this or not, I hope that you do. Do you know that the Exodus story is a story of adoption? It starts with adoption. Moses, I don't recommend this method of getting children into the arms of families, but like Moses was put in a basket and adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. Now, we want to kind of overlook the fact that it was her father who was trying to kill all the other babies, but there is something beautiful about the fact that she did not share her father's desires for these children. She decided to take this child and raise him as her own, call him Moses, and give him a life that he would have been deprived of without her. But that's not the only way that adoption works in the story of the Exodus. God brings the children of Israel out of Egypt and offers to be a father to them. It is a central theme throughout that story. He tells Pharaoh that Israel is my son, he says. Israel is my firstborn. He actually says, you'll let my people go or I'll kill your firstborn. God loved this nation like a father is to love their child, and God desired a personal relationship with Israel. And the story of the Exodus, with all of its miracles and all of its struggles, really is the story of a father who is going to do anything he possibly can to make sure his kids are safe and provided for and thriving in the covenant that he wants to make with them. But it's going to take 40 years. It's going to be grueling and hard. There are going to be setbacks and disappointments. Any of this sound familiar? And there were going to be times where even Moses would say, what is happening here? This is not what I expected. But even in those most difficult moments for Moses, he would tell God, if you're with us, we can do it. If you're with us, we'll make this happen. Even more than that, the story of the Exodus is our adoption story. It is part of a larger narrative that repeats itself over and over again through the pages of the Bible. In fact, the Exodus isn't even the first story of someone seeking refuge in Egypt, finding that, but then being driven out by the Pharaoh with gifts. Abram and Sarai did the same thing. God was actually hinting of the Exodus before it even occurred, but then it is repeated over and over again throughout Scripture, most importantly in Jesus, where his parents sought refuge in Egypt, and that famous verse that we know, out of Egypt I called my son, was God originally saying that about his nation Israel, but now we know that he was saying that about his own son. The offer of God to be our father and for us to be part of his family. He wants us, and he's willing to go to great lengths. That makes this story a beautiful story of adoption. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 18 says, I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty. The second lesson is that God leads us through Red Sea moments. For those of you who saw the film, there at the end of the movie, there's a dedication to my mother, Linda. And that dedication was written by Justin Dobbs. He's my brother-in-law, and you probably saw him in the film. He writes a lot of our material. And he wrote this dedication and then asked, what would you think about putting that at the end of the movie? And I told him that was fine, and now I realize every time I watch the movie, I'm in tears saying, I told him he could do it. The dedication reads, for Linda Dehut, who, after telling the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he had done, crossed over Jordan. My mother, Linda, gained her reward in November of last year. And we were blessed to have been there during her final days. I was still editing out of Egypt. It was a longer process than we thought, and so a lot of us had to bring work with us, and so there were periods of time where she was resting and I was editing. And I was having a conversation with her, and she was really disappointed that she wasn't going to get to see the film when it was finished. I wasn't close enough. Because she's been at all of our premieres. She's been one to push through these various trials of ours to see these things into completion. And she said, I'm bummed I'm not going to be able to see it. And I remember telling her, Mom, you're going to the real promised land. There's nothing I can show you in that film that's going to make you miss where you're currently going. If you knew my mom, you knew that she loved God and she loved people and she loved sacred selections quite a bit. In fact, adoption is a huge part of our family's story. My father was adopted. Let's see if I can get this all right, because I lose track. My father was adopted. Two of my brothers were adopted. My brother-in-law and 7 of our nieces and nephews have been adopted, many of them through the help of sacred selection. And Mom was there cheering on those efforts. Adoption entered our family, and it was a fluke. We already had 5 biological children, and there was a kid in need, and my parents didn't hesitate. And that started us on a path where it just became natural. So now I have a brother who's 21 years younger than me because my parents just couldn't help themselves. They were great. And Zach he's really grown up into a fine young man. Mom would say this about the Red Sea. When I was in college, 17, 18 years ago, and I complained to her about, I've got no money and, things are so hard and I see no way forward. And she said, no, you're just standing at the shore of the Red Sea. And God does this with all of us. Sometimes, she said, he'll wait until you're at the water's edge and you're looking behind you and you see the Egyptian army and you can't go backward and there's no way that you can go forward. And God's going to wait until you say, this is impossible, before he makes a way, so that you know that when you're walking through it, God's the only one who can take credit for it. She said that while we were trying to raise funds for this particular film. And for all of you who have helped with this particular fundraiser tonight, it's a monumental task, isn't it? You think we've got this number and we really need to hit it. And I don't know about you all, because we've done it so many times, but I get a few days until the thing's over. We do a month-long thing. I don't know how you all do it in one day. It's amazing. And we go like, this isn't going to work. This is never going to work. And I don't know how many times Mom brought up the Red Sea to me during an Appian Media fundraiser. And she would say, you're right there on the edge. You feel the Egyptians breathing down your neck? Yeah, just wait. Just wait. And so I'll share just one of these stories with you, because I had this phone call with her about this particular situation. Egypt and Jordan were incredibly expensive. The film permits, one location was costing us $5,000 just to film there for an afternoon. It was the type of money that we had never handled. We had to rent their gear over there. We weren't allowed to bring in our own. So this was 3 to 4 times the cost of any previous production. And we had a month-long fundraiser. We were encouraging people, hey, whoever raises the most money in your town will bring the premiere to your town. And it actually was a genius idea. It wasn't mine. And it was really working. But we were 24 hours out, and we were about $50,000 short of this budget. I'm looking at my notes now. It was about 12 hours remaining. And I remember having this conversation with Mom, and she was not worried. I was freaking out, but she was not worried. And a gentleman calls me. He's never donated to Appian Media before. I don't know him at all, but he knows someone on our team. And he lives in Auburn. They're kind of competitive over there. And he said, where are the numbers at? How much would it take for us to have the premiere in Auburn? And I said, well, let me check my records. You currently got $100 towards your particular city. And he said, let me make some calls. And with hours to spare, this guy calls and says, sign me up for fill in the blank number. It pushed us over the top. And he said, and give me updates until this thing is over to make sure that we don't fall out of first place. And they did for a moment. I had to call him, and he said, oh, no, you don't. And he pushed us, I even let him beat Indianapolis so that we didn't have the premiere. This guy came through. And when I called and told my parents, and I told Mom, she wasn't surprised. How many times has God done that in your life? How many times, David and Dana, have you seen this happen where you go, this is not going to work. It's impossible. And then you go, oh, but we're dealing with God here, and he specializes in the impossible. He simply asks you to get your toes up to the shore. And as Moses told the people there at the Red Sea, he actually just said, just stand still and be quiet and let him do his thing, if I can paraphrase Moses slightly. And this is the final lesson I want to leave you with. And it's one of the ones that have hit me the most since going through that trip ourselves, but in telling this story and getting it ready for you all. Don't waste the wilderness. And if you saw the film, it's one of my favorite scenes where Jeremy, man, we put him through it. We said, just trudge out into the desert for a while, and we're going to fly the drone around you and shoot from the shade of the truck, and you just look awesome out there. And he huffed and puffed and did a great job. And he talks about how God needed the people to go through this situation where they woke up every morning, and the only way they were going to survive that day was if God put manna on the ground. And the only way they were going to survive that day is if every once in a while he brought water out where water was not previously. And every day they had to go, I am either on God's side or I'm dead tomorrow. And it was such a process. It took so long. God had a lot to teach them, and they needed to learn to rely on him, learn to let go, and to trust him. We all have a wilderness, and they look different. And some of our wildernesses last for a brief period of time. Some of our wildernesses are things that no one else knows about. It's just something happening in our own minds. Some of our wildernesses go on for months or years. And we could begrudge the wilderness and just grin and bear it and wait until the wilderness is over, or we can use that time in the desert to rely on the God who's there every morning, providing for our needs, saying, trust me, I've got you, it will be okay. Karen and I have not personally been through the adoption process, but we've We've cried along with siblings who have waited and got the call, flew to Arizona, and the thing fell through. And they like, what were we waiting for? And we've seen friends go through the same thing. Don't waste the wilderness. God can do something with you while you're waiting. God can do something with you in the times where it feels like things are falling apart. It's just not working. Because you think about what he did to Moses. That man's story is not one of just a series of incredible successes until he achieved it. It really wasn't. It was a series of remarkable failures until God was able to use him and do incredible things. So maybe you're waiting. Maybe you're waiting for your situation to change, whatever that may be. Maybe you're waiting to be selected for something, to be selected for a child. Maybe you're waiting to be selected for that promotion, selected by that girl, maybe. You know, that happens. Some of us waited. And you're waiting and you're thinking, what is taking so long? What's wrong with me? Why isn't this happening? And instead, you should be saying, God's doing this for a reason. What should I be learning? God told his people in Deuteronomy, you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, so that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothing did not wear out on you, and your foot did not swell these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, the Lord your God disciplines you. So you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and fearing him. Why? What was the promise? 40 years was a long time. The promise was, the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs flowing out in the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of oil trees and honey. I'm sorry, I'm picturing the land that Mom's seeing right now. It's a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron and out of whose hills you can dig copper, and you shall eat and be full, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. And that is a promise he has made to every single one of us. We're walking through the wilderness right now, but the land is in sight. It's not far. He's given us glimpses of it, enough for us to go, there's nowhere else I would rather be. And I want my children to go there, and I want my friends to go there. I want everyone that I know to go there. And we're going to walk this wilderness together, and we're going to get to that promised land together. So we're all on this journey home, and it's my prayer that through our collective efforts, through the generous hearts that are here tonight, through the incredible hearts that have opened themselves up to children, to families, that we can help welcome these children into homes and families that will love them and provide for them, and most importantly, will lead them to our Father and to that land. A Father that invites each of us into his family and promises to take us all to our real home. And I pray that we can do that tonight. Thank you.